mannequin to sit in the chair so I can know where to focus. Okay, good morning. My name is Gary Matsuoka, and we're here at Laguna Hills Nursery on a Saturday morning. And today's class is going to be on the hedges and screens that we recommend for our local gardens. And we can start off with our number one selling hedge and screen plant, which would be this thing we call it the wax leaf privet. And there's a few reasons why the botanical name is Ligustrum japonica texanum. And generally you can keep it as a hedge around 30 inches all the way up to about a screen that's about 10 feet. 10, the book says 12. I haven't really seen them quite that big, but they can probably do it. So the couple reasons we like this plant is that no one kills them. Any nursery can grow this in the worst soil possible, and they usually don't die. They're a nice green color all year, very little mess. They do bloom usually in May of each year. This one's going to bloom a little earlier. We got a little warmer early this year, or we didn't get as cold a winter. So they have a mass of fragrant white flowers. Those are followed by little purple seed pods if you don't shear them off. Most people shear this once in a while, and you won't have the seed pods or this little fruits that they make on there. It's in the same family as olives, so the fruit resemble really tiny olives. I don't believe they're edible. And generally, you would plant them for a hedge or a screen. Well, for a screen, 5 feet apart is close enough. For a hedge, I like to go about a foot and a half, 2 feet apart. Now, there's no such thing as getting them too close. So hedges and screens both, if you plant them, you can line them up, plant to plant. You're really not going to hurt them by getting them too close together. So privet is our number one selling plant, again, because no one seems to kill them. They're fairly drought resistant if you don't water them. Once they're established, which takes about 6 months to a year, you can turn off the water for extended periods of time, and they don't seem to ever die from that. They don't look good, but they don't seem to die from that. And they have some color also. Now, there's a relative that's new on the market. This is Ligustrum chinensis or sinensis, a Chinese privet, and this one is known for its colorful leaves. This one was not going to get as tall. We're using it as a hedge type plant from about a foot and a half to maybe 3 foot tall. Let's see if they have a height. Well, it says it can make it up to 7 foot. So that's a decent size. And it's the same color all year. The more sun it gets, the more yellow or chartreuse the foliage is. So it's a nice contrast. You can see all the contrast with the green here. So those are a couple of different types of privets. And this one that happens to be called Sunshine. So that's our number. This one in fact is our number one seller. Number two is probably going to be, at least for screens and tall hedges, the Podocarpus. This one is Podocarpus graciliar. And it's actually properly known now as Afrocarpus. They changed it because Podocarpus are built a little bit, true Podocarpus built a little bit differently than Afrocarpus. The advantage of this one is it grows fast. So if you need a tall screen quickly, you know, I'd say a 6-foot hedge to 10 to 15 foot screens. These plants actually can grow 40 feet. So that's one of the disadvantages. They grow quickly and you have to trim them a lot. But I've seen some nice hedges of this one, say planted about 2 feet apart, kept around 6 foot, 7 foot tall. Not bad looking, but if you don't trim it enough, they'll get out of hand and become large trees. So that's Podocarpus graciliar. Common name that's used occasionally is fern pine. And they are sold as street trees also, so you can get them for use as a tree. No foliage below 5 feet and a nice round head. They're actually very nice at that in that use. I would say maybe better for use as a tree than as a hedge or screen, but it is quite popular because of its speed of growth. About 3 foot a year on that, maybe a little faster. This one, close, 30 inches or so per year. Okay, another one that's real popular would be the Carolina cherry. Now, since we have them both here, this is Carolina cherry, and this one is often called Catalina cherry. Carolina cherry is Prunus caroliana, and the Catalina cherry is Prunus lyoni, or actually Elicifolia. So this is native to the Channel Islands and to the coastline near the Channel Islands. So it's a West Coast plant. This is native to the East Coast United States. They're very similar in that they both grow kind of oval-shaped screens, and you could use them as tall hedges. This one's a little better as a screen than as a hedge because it's a little coarser, not quite as dense. They both bloom kind of filamentous white flowers in early spring, which here is late winter. They both can make berries. The advantage of Carolina cherry is the cherries are only about the size of peas, so they're maybe a little bigger than the pea, so they're smaller. This one makes cherries that look like regular European cherries. They taste fairly good, but they're all seed. So if somebody works with the genetics a little bit, breeds this one so it has a smaller pit, then it might be a worthy fruiting plant for this area too. I'm pretty sure that the natives that lived in the area a long time ago probably used it for food because it's not bad tasting. So anyway, this one, of course, is being a native here, especially near the coast, very drought tolerant. This one's not bad. Carolina cherry is noted for only needing moderate amounts of water. Now we grow both of these because if we don't grow them in our soil, these can have a much duller, more yellow-green look to them, so we prefer to grow them ourselves if we're going to sell them. Camellia cherries, I haven't seen enough of them around to tell you that the growers don't do good enough job with that one. This one is a more moderate speed grower, figure about 2 foot a year. The Catalina cherry, 3 to 4 foot a year, so it's faster growing. They both can top out around 20 foot or so. but they're both good for screening at around 8 to 10 foot. There's good height for them. But they'll make it higher than that. That's Carolina. So native to the East Coast. And this one's native to our area. So right along the coastline, you'll see pockets of them here or there. But, okay, the next most commonly requested would be the Italian cypress. It's got a long name, but that's Italian cypress. And they're popular because they can get really tall, but not all that wide. So typically in about 10 years or so, this plant would be maybe even less than 10 years, 20 foot tall and 3 foot wide. So 3 foot wide columns going up 20 foot. Now, if you gave them 50 years, they'll make it to 80 foot. So they can get a little overwhelming, but they don't take that much room in the yard. There are different forms of this. This is glauca, which has got kind of a blue-green, bluish-green foliage. The original ones, you can find some that have greener, mint-green foliage on them too. So there are different variations on this, but this is the one that most of the growers grow. There's also a dwarf strain that grows about half as fast, called Tiny Towers, Totem. There's different strains of that one on the market too.
Long and narrow, what would the spacing be?
Well, 3 foot apart, reasonable amount of time, about 8 years to fill in that gap, maybe a little less than that. But you can put them as close as you want together. So there's a famous, Santiago, Chile, there's a famous place that has this as hedging. So they planted them, virtually inches apart, and they have someone who his only job is to keep them hedged, and they made it looking like a fort. This whole thing is hedged to look like a fort, and they said the guy trims it. By the time he's finished with one trimming, it's time to do the second trimming. He just makes his way around, so it trims up real well. In fact, when I was younger, my neighbor had these trained as Roman columns along his driveway. So they're exactly 10 foot tall, chopped off straight at the top. Actually quite nice looking as a Roman column. So, or Greek column, if you were. So they're trimmable, and you can keep them any size, but they can take off on you and make it to 80 foot. Now here's a distant relative. This is native to California, Arizona, and the surrounding Southwest. This is Cupressus arizonica. This selection is called Blue Ice. It is really blue. A bit wider. So this one figure 8 foot across and about 30 foot tall. So it's a shorter, a bit wider, but beautiful color for a screen. And I would also expect both of these to be very drought tolerant around here. So they can probably, once they're established for a few years, you can probably go a few years without any irrigation at all, and they'd probably make it. Okay, surprisingly, we do sell a lot of bamboo for screening, but they can also be used for hedging. Now, there's several classes of bamboo out there, and this is a clumping type. So left on its own, it's not going to spread that quickly. You're talking maybe an inch a year in all directions. So they're quite upright growing. This is Bambusa, forget the whole botanical name. You know, there's an M. Then this is Alphonse Carr. And it's noted because it is the best for hedging. Usually the foliage stays from the very bottom, and it's good for a 10 to 15 foot tall hedge, or perhaps a 20 foot tall screen. So bamboo, a lot of people like it because it doesn't, the width on this one just doesn't get that wide. So figure 3-4 foot is going to be the maximum width on it, and 10 to 15 foot height on the height of it, and it stays pretty full. And bamboo tends to grow about 3 foot every year till it gets close to its maximum height. So the new stems come out every spring, shoot up about 3 foot higher than the old stems did, and then they mature, and then the next year they'll send up more stems that go another 3 foot taller until they reach maximum height. The stems themselves with the leaves on them live about 3 years, and then each stem just turns brown or just dries up, and then you can cut it off and use it for staking other plants. Bamboo stakes are kind of useful that way. So they are a little messy on the leaf drop, especially in winter time underneath the plant. But again, if you get the right time, like this Alphonse Carr, it doesn't encroach too much on the neighbors. I've seen some of the giant bamboos in people's yards where the stems go up 50, 60 foot and then arch out 20 foot out, which can mess up your neighbor if the neighbor may not like that. The other nice thing about bamboo is that each stem only grows once in its lifetime. For about 3 month period, they'll go up to full size. And if you want it to be shorter, like this one, potentially you can get up about 15 foot. If you want them at 10 foot, once they reach 15 foot, just cut them down to 10 and that's it. That stem will never grow an inch taller than that. So once you're trimming probably mid to late summer, and that's the trimming you do for the height for the year. So bamboo is easy that way. The other thing that a lot of contractors like is they can order fairly large bamboo that's already 10, 12 foot high, say in a 15 gallon, not this size, this is a number 5, but a number 15 gallon container, which is this size. There are nurseries that specialize in having 10, 12 foot bamboo, and they can just order those. Most other hedging plants, if they want them 10 to 12 foot, they'd have to be in a 24-inch box. So you can get tall bamboo screenings easier than a lot of the other hedges.
Yeah, that seems short for bamboo.
Yeah, there's different heights. So
That's full sun.
full sun to part sun. Most bamboo would rather be in full sun. So this is not a running type. Clumping type, there are running types that are, I've seen running types like golden bamboo used for hedges also. But when you do that, you've got to make sure you keep them in your space. So what they do is they put a barrier around them. And they'll plant the bamboo plants in a row and then surround them with what is called a bamboo root barrier. It's a plastic, rubbery plastic thing that goes in the ground about 2 foot deep, and it keeps them from running out of that zone. In my neighborhood, I've seen one, and it looks very nice. They keep it right around 7 foot, and it's a golden bamboo. It wants to run, 20, 30 foot or indefinitely in all directions, but they've kept it in that zone pretty nicely, and it looks good. So they can be done that way too. They claim if you have concrete sidewalks around the planter bed, the bamboo won't go beyond the concrete. I would think if it's made properly, then they won't. Okay. Now one of the Ones that used to be recommended a lot that's no longer recommended by anyone but us would be the Pittosporum silver sheen. So the full name of this, Pittosporum tenuifolium, or Pittosporum if you want. Pittosporum tenuifolium. And the variety is, cultivar is silver sheen. Back in the 80s when this first appeared, 80s, early 90s, this was a real easy plant to grow. Beautiful foliage. Grows very quickly up to about 20 foot if you let it go, or you can keep it hedged or as a screen any height between, say, 6 and 20 foot. Absolutely gorgeous. And then the late 90s, they all started rotting out because the industry changed from dirt to growing plants in dirt to growing plants in compost. And so now they have a really nasty reputation of looking great when you buy them and then being dead within a couple years. Usually it's within 1 year. They just dry up and die. So most contractors, landscape contractors, won't touch it. So if you want this, well, they don't even want to plant it. So we grow our own crops in our own top pot potting soil, and we do not expect these to have any trouble. And they're so pretty. So anyway, we have a decent crop of these going. And they can grow, if you don't trim them, say 20 foot high by about 8 foot wide. Is dimensions on it. Say 5 feet apart for screening purposes, but the original purpose was a hedge, probably about 2 to 3 foot apart between plants. So that's that. Silver sheen, again, I wouldn't buy it from any other nursery. Don't trust it unless we grow it. Okay, that takes care of most of the bigger screens. Now, hedge-wise, again, the privet plants are real popular. Now, most nurseries do a good job with Westringia. Which is actually a relative of rosemary. Same family. So here's rosemary. Of course, these are native around the Mediterranean. These are native to, I think, Westringia is the South Pacific, Australia, I believe that's where that comes from. They both can bloom pretty much all year. Rosemary is usually blue. Westringia is white, kind of lavender. They both can, now this is an upright rosemary. There are dwarf versions, and there are dwarf versions of this too. They both can be used as a hedge somewhere between 2 and 4 feet. This can get a little higher. Well, they both can, I've seen them both 5, 6 foot tall. So they can get up there, although I would say easier right around waist height. Both extremely drought tolerant once they're established. Rosemary, in theory, can get by without any water except for our normal rainfall here once it's established. Westringias, I'm pretty sure, can do the same thing. They look better with water, but they don't require either much, and our growers don't see, the soil that the growers are using doesn't seem to be able to kill either one. Although, you know, if you do fix the soil on them, they probably will look better and grow faster. So that's Westringia and rosemary. This one happens to be called Blue Gem, and this is Tuscan Blue, which is a very popular cultivar of the rosemary. So those are good Mediterranean type hedges. I really like this one. So that's dwarf myrtle from the Mediterranean region. And this does bloom every year with little white flowers, makes little kind of purplish berries. It is used medicinally and culinary purposes too. So that's your true dwarf myrtle. It's kind of like the silver sheen in that most growers don't want to grow this, or at least the contractors do not want to plant it because they tend to rot out. So we grow our own dwarf myrtles also. They're not too slow. We get plants that are maybe this big when we start them in little tiny little pots. And then within a year they look like that. So they're growing at a decent rate. They'll make it to about 3 to 5 feet. They're not super fast, but they're not bad and absolutely gorgeous. Really dense foliage naturally. So one of our favorite hedging plants. I don't have a whole lot of those in stock at the moment. We do sell them quite readily once they get up to size. So that's the Myrtus communicipacta dwarf myrtle. Now the most common hedge, say between 1 and 4 foot tall, would be the boxwood. And we happen to grow the evergreen version called Japanese boxwood. So this is Buxus japonica. There's quite a few cultivars of this out there. This one is Green Beauty. Which is probably the most popular one. Whoops. Beauty. Sold in our area. And the reason it's sold, the original Japanese boxwood in the winter months, if it's cool for quite a while, the leaves turn kind of tannish. They change their color to kind of tannish. They don't fall, and then they turn back green when the weather warms up. Green Beauty tends to, the leaves start out a light green and then end up a dark green and stay that way pretty much the life of the leaf. So they don't off color in the winter, although I would think if you're in a colder area, maybe in the mountains, they would probably turn off color. And we don't trust this plant from other growers either. We have a lot of customers who say they planted 100 of these and lost about 20 of them after a year, and then a couple of years later they replace them, and then they lose those. They keep losing parts of their hedge. Again, it's a soil problem with their suppliers, so we grow our own Green Beauty boxwoods ourselves from plants that are, again, about that big when we get them. So this is the classic. I mean, in the old days, we wouldn't sell them in regular conventional containers. They'd come to us in flats with maybe 100 little plants in there, and that's what people bought. 100 really tiny, 3 or 4 inch height plants, and you just plant them real close, a few inches apart at the edge of your lawn and make a little hedge that way. No one seems to be that patient anymore. Another one we like, this is abelia. And this one is called Kaleidoscope. The abelias are from Asia, and their natural form is actually not hedge-like. Their natural form is kind of fountainy. But they trim up really well into hedge form, and they don't. This is another one that doesn't die from the bad soil the growers are using. So we do buy them in because we don't have to grow them ourselves. We don't have enough room to grow everything we want to grow. So we pick and choose what the growers kill and tend to grow those, and the ones that can tolerate the bad soil, we buy them in. But this one's good for about a 2 foot hedge, and it does. The leaves start out kind of rosy as they develop, and they go green and yellow, and in the fall they can actually go kind of orange colored. And then they also bloom little white flowers late spring through summer. So there's a lot going on with those. There's different versions of abelia out there. Sherwood's a really pretty one that's not so yellow, with a lot of pink in the leaves, and a few other varieties that we can get. Some get taller, so some are probably good for use as a hedge 4 to 5 foot. This one's best for use, I would say 2 to 3 foot. Now, I like camellias. When I was a kid, I grew up with the camellia hedge at my parents' house, north side, so a darker area. Now, a lot of these hedge plants can actually grow in shade. Boxwood's known for it. The privets are known for growing in shade. The Podocarpus, known for growing in shade. Camellias, I've seen them grow in the sun, but they look better in mostly shade. Little sun, a few hours of sun a day helps them with the density and all. So camellia, this is Camellia japonica. This is one of our favorite ones. The red flowers on this one. This is Tom Knudsen. Now, there are a lot of different camellias out there. This one's intriguing to us too, because this one could work, although it's slow. This is Camellia sinensis. Which is commercial tea. You can have a hedge in your yard in the shade. This one can grow. Well, most camellias grow 10 foot, 15 foot, easily kept any height because they're slow growing. They grow about 10 inches, 12 inches a year max, most likely 6 inches a year. So when I was a kid, our camellia hedge was about a 5-footer. Camellia sinensis. Now this plant here is growing pretty fast. Looks like it'll grow a foot this year. But yeah, the tea plants are fairly slow too. And what you do to, once it's a good size, the newest leaves on their spring growth spurt, which is right now, the top 3 leaves of this plant, you just trim them off and make tea out of those leaves. Now this does bloom also, inch wide white flowers with yellow stamens in the fall months. And the flowers are fragrant on it. So that's another possibility. If you've got heavier soil, you might want to surround these with our top potting soil, which is slightly acidic to their favor and better breathing. And they do like, they like average water. However, we've seen camellias in abandoned yards doing okay on north sides. So they can get by with low water once they're well established. Now, a lot of camellia growers, and we don't grow our own camellias because they're kind of slow, don't use the best soil. So we do recommend, if you buy camellias, to remove some of the soil when you're installing them and replace it with our top potting soil. If you're growing them in the shade, there's not going to be much shock involved. But the soil the growers use does cause some trouble down the road. Okay, a few more. This is pineapple guava feijoa. If you want to be accurate, some of the newer books listed as not as feijoa, but as aca, Celowiana. So these come from South America. They're actually fruit-producing plants. The other name for it is pineapple guava. They're in the same family as guavas, not real close related. You eat the fruit kind of like you would eat a kiwi fruit. They're not all self-fertile, so if you have 3 or 4 of these growing, they'll all make fruit. The fruit quality varies too. Some of the fruit's better than others. So they have kind of slightly olive appearance to them. In fact, you can use olives as hedges and screens also. I didn't bring it in. And they are fairly drought tolerant when they're established, not when you plant them though. You have to water these frequently when you get them planted. But once they're rooted in, they're pretty drought tolerant. They grow up to 20 foot tall as a screen. Hedge-wise, about 5 or 6 foot tall is a good height for them. They can't be kept too narrow. They're not as tight as some of the other plants we're using. But they do also have white and red flowers that bloom in the spring, and then the fruit that falls off in the fall. So they're fruit producing, another edible type. Now, there are a lot of, quote, evergreen edibles that are used as screens. So citrus, any citrus can be used as a screen also. So if you're into plants that make food too, citrus. And another interesting one, which I should have brought a plant in, we're not allowed, in this area of California, we're not allowed to carry citrus, but grapefruit, lemons, limes, oranges, all those can be used to make hedges or screens. And also loquat. The botanical name is Areobatria. Loquats have the really big leaves. You wouldn't think they could use them as a hedge or screen, but the books have it listed, and I did it at my first house I owned because my neighbor loved the fruit, and I loved the fruit. So we planted 10 seedlings between our properties and kept it about 3 foot wide and about 7 foot tall. And he harvested the fruit on his side. I harvested the fruit on my side. We were both happy. Trimmed it once or twice a year to keep it full. Served a good purpose. Loquats, another one they say in California, can get by with very little to no water. Better fruit quality if you water them though. So loquats can be used. I did bring in here the purple hop seed. I've seen this used as a hedge, but it's kind of open. I've seen some nice hedges out of it. It's better for use as a screen. Oops. So purple hop seed is Dodonia viscosa purpurea. There's a green version of this too. What this does is in the summertime, the leaves are pretty much a bronze green color like this. In the wintertime, they pick up a real deep purpley bronze color like this. And they just change back and forth. The leaves don't necessarily fall off. I mean, they do shed leaves slowly. Fairly clean plant, does grow very fast. We're talking 3 to 4 foot a year. Their natural form is kind of a teardrop, so they make a nice teardrop screen. They can be hedged, and I've seen it. One of the disadvantages of purple hop seed, And this kind of looks like an acacia. And acacias can be done the same way, and they have the same problem, is that most of them do not live past 20 years. So they're short-lived plants. Now, the other short-lived plant we have that we brought up, rosemary, seems only good for about a dozen years before it ages out and dies, gets real ugly. Purple hopseed, somewhere between 10 and 20 years before it gets real ugly too. And the same thing happens with acacia plants. They grow fast. They don't need much water. This doesn't need much water once it's established, but they kind of live short lives. So this is Dodonia, and you can use a lot of the acacias, which are similar in appearance. The acacias bloom yellow. This doesn't have much of a flower. I did bring one of the other Podocarpus. This is kind of a leftover specimen that no one bought, so it's a little crooked. It should be straight. This was originally known as icy blue. Now some growers call it crystal blue. And some others call it blue mist. But it is a nice, light, bluish green colored, slow growing Podocarpus. So it's related to this, but it's denser, naturally denser and smaller. So we like to use it as a hedge to about, I would say, 3 to 6 foot, or as a screen. It's supposed to grow tall, but I haven't never seen one over, say, 6 foot so far. So maybe 8 foot. So a nice plant, very slow growing. We're getting less than a foot a year on them. We tried growing a crop of these once, and they were in the nursery for 3 years before anyone would buy one. So if a nursery grows something for 3 years, it's got to be over $100. So it's hard to sell plants that are slow growing, in that you can't price them high enough to cover your cost of taking up the land for that long. So we'd rather have someone else grow them. They tend to be expensive, right around $100 to grow that plant. That was icy blue. Any questions?
I'll throw you a curveball.
Sure.
So one thing I didn't really mention is perennial grass on the sugar cane. There's leaves that's not on front of mine, like a 5 or 6 trees.
I've recommended that a few times, generally in a place where there's nobody walking. So I love sugar cane. It grows like bamboo. Of course, it's related to bamboo. Sugar cane will grow about 3 foot a year straight up. It has 3 foot long leaves or 4 foot long leaves that come off. It is evergreen, although it looks tattered in the winter months. The only disadvantage of sugar cane is that the leaves are they're sharp. They don't have any spines on them, but they give you paper cuts. So people who work among, the workers in the sugarcane fields, they're totally covered. Leather gloves, goggles, because when you walk through the leaves, it can cut your skin. But as a screen where no one walks, nice plant. Because they look like bamboo. They don't run sideways. They just go straight up. They come with purple stems or green stems or yellow stems. They come with green leaves or bronze leaves. And we do carry the green leaf ones and the bronze leaf ones. We'll have some for sale probably this summer. I don't have anything right now. But we do and have sold them for that purpose, for a screening purpose, say on a hillside where no one's walking that much. And of course, if they get tall, so what sugarcane does, these things get around 20 foot tall. They're just too top heavy. They fall on the ground. In nature, that's how they propagate. The branch lays on the ground, it roots all along its stem, and it sends up new shoots. But that's really the only way it spreads quickly, so you just cut them off and eat them when they start to lean over. So yeah, let's mention that's Catalina saccharinum. Oh, it's named for, well, anyway, sugar cane. So that's definitely a doable one too. And we have sold it for that purpose. Okay.
Good.
All right. Thanks.